Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I'm doing a graphite pencil portrait of Margot Robbie, and I'm going to work on regular paper this time. I'm going to use two types of graphite pencils as usual, the Faber Castell regular graphite pencils and the Faber Castell matte graphite pencils. But unlike a few previous drawings, this one is going to be done on regular paper, meaning that it's not going to be primed with clear gesso or anything like that. So this is just a regular Fabriano drawing paper, about 200 GSM and about 9 times 12 inches in size. The background is going to be a little bit darker, so I started with some darker values and I'm trying to blend it thoroughly, and of course I'll have to do a substantial amount of blending for it to look smooth, because if it doesn't look smooth it's going to be a little bit distracting, and I don't want it to be distracting. I don't need any shapes or suggestions of shapes back there, just a plain darker background. For blending in this stage, I'm mostly going to use Q-tips because they seem to work really well with graphite, especially on regular paper. And for smoothing larger areas, a brush is also a good choice. I'm going to start working on the facial features now that I've done a part of the background. And I'm going to start with some of the darker details on the eyes, like the eyelashes, the pupil and things like that. So I'm starting with the eyes. The eyebrows can be a little bit tricky because you need to make a lot of very thin, clean, dark marks. So it can be a little bit tricky because you need to have a very sharp pencil, and sometimes you need to apply a little bit more pressure. Because she has, even though she's blonde here and she has lighter hair and lighter complexion, she has slightly darker eyebrows and a little bit fuller. That's the pupil, which is one of the darkest details on the portrait. And I worked around the catchlight in the eye, and I'm shading around it now with a slightly lighter pencil. So the idea is to create contrast between the pupil and the iris, and of course that catchlight, which needs to be the brightest part of the eye here. Shading the eye socket area, trying to get that transition between the eyebrow and the eye socket and the nose area. And now moving on to the lower eyelid and the eyelashes on it. Adding a little bit of shadow here, where it should complete the appearance of the eye. So as for the hair, here at the top it's going to be a little bit darker, but my main job will be dividing it into segments so that it doesn't look, so that it looks a little bit more complex, so that I can achieve a little bit more depth in it. The top part looks fairly straight, and then the rest of it is a little bit wavy or scrunchy. Moving on to the background here in the top right part of the drawing, and then just blending it some more so that it's smoother. I mostly used 10B and a 12B in the matte graphite range for the background, but I didn't use too much pressure, but it's still fairly dark. Now as for the hair, in addition to those darker marks that I created with matte graphite pencils to separate those larger segments of hair and add some deeper shadows in between them, I'm also going to use some lighter pencils to draw the texture of the hair for those longer, smoother marks. So the main reason why I'm using two types of pencils is because the matte graphite pencils are less reflective, so more matte, and they also have darker values like the 10B, 12B, 14B. So I'm going to use again some of those darker ones here at the top because here the hair is darker around the parting. She has a middle parting here in this picture. The reference is going to be attached or in the description as usual if you want to have a look at it. Now I'm doing a bit of blending with a brush, and that adds a little bit of value to the hair. So it makes my job easier because I can achieve a little bit more value, but at the same time blend some of those marks, basically soften them so that I don't have to draw every single hair. It helps me create an illusion of volume and density of the hair. Moving on to the other eye, or first I'm just going to do the eyebrow and then maybe shade a little bit of the forehead area. And again, they are a little bit darker. I'm going to start by shading the forehead lightly and then try to build up the value gradually. Again, I'm blending with a Q-tip, which is a good blending tool as I already mentioned. But it adds a little bit of value while you blend because it also pushes the graphite into some of those lighter areas. And a similar thing happens when you use a brush as well. I'm adding a little bit of shadow here around the sides of the forehead. Now I'm going to do a little bit of work on the other eye. Again, I'm starting with darker shapes, darker details. It's just a habit I have from when I started drawing portraits. I always found it easier to draw some of those darker shapes, darker lines first, and then sort of build value around them. Now, obviously, different people will have a completely different approach, but I feel like this one is a little bit cleaner and a little bit less stressful for me. Here's the pupil. I'm going to do that with a 14B because this is one of the darkest details on my drawing. And again, I'm working around that reflection in the eye, trying to avoid covering it with graphite. Shading the rest of the pupil, because even though the white of the eye is white or mostly white, it's not going to appear white when the eyeball is in the shadow. After all, it is a round object, so only one part of it is going to be much lighter, and that's the catch light area. The rest of it is going to be getting gradually darker towards the corners of the eye. Onto the nose and the nostrils more specifically. Again, going for those darker details. When I put those in, it's easier for me to shade and to navigate through the rest of the drawing. And of course, to be able to put them in approximately the right place, you need to have a sketch in place. For that, you can just use a simple tracing method because it's quick and easy. Not the most precise method, actually, but it's precise enough, and it's very quick, and it allows you to get into the drawing very quickly. I'm going to do the mouth now. Right now I'm just drawing some of these darker shapes, and I still haven't really done much work on defining the shape of the face and the facial topography. That will come a little bit later. I just wanted to switch to the more conventional approach when using graphite pencils, because I probably had enough of experimenting with graphite on a rough surface like clear gesso. And I've done some drawings that I was pretty happy with, but to be honest, I found the last portrait I did in this technique a little bit exhausting. So when I do commission drawings, most of the time I work on regular paper, and most of the time I do most of the work with matte graphite pencils. That seems to be my go-to tool when drawing commission portraits. That, and maybe a black colored pencil, or one of those Kohinoor black pencils, which are a mixture of some binder and charcoal, but pretty much behave like colored pencils, I suppose. Now I'm doing some shading on the face, and first I lay down a little bit of value using a lighter grade of a pencil, and then I'm blending it gently and pushing that charcoal dust from the lighter areas onto the darker areas, trying to gradually build up the value in different parts of the face. During this stage there will be times when the portrait will look kind of ugly, and when the whole thing will look a little bit off in terms of likeness. Speaking of which, I do think that this reference is a little bit challenging, because she doesn't really look that much like herself. There are some interesting shadows there, some interesting contrasts, but in terms of the likeness, I probably could have picked a better reference photo. And 3/4 photos are always easier to kind of deal with for me than these ones where you're looking at the face from the front. But it is what it is. We're just going to see how it goes. It doesn't have to be perfect anyway. It's not a photocopy, and I'm not a photocopier machine, and I'm not trying to be one, so if it deviates a little bit from the reference, no biggie. You usually have more of an excuse to do that when you're drawing landscapes or portraits of animals, but with people, you have to worry a little bit more about precision. There are some shadows here on the right side above the upper lip, so I think you can tell that the light source is coming more from the left, so there's going to be more shadows on the right side, and there's going to be more darker values to the right, and all of the shapes will be casting a little bit of shadow to the right. The teeth, as white as they are also partly in the shadow, so I need to add a little bit of value on top of them to subdue that lighter value a little bit, so that they don't look like they're sticking out too much. But don't worry, I'm going to be fidgeting with the mouth and the shape of the mouth and the teeth quite a bit more before I finally finish this drawing. I'm just going to go over some parts of the face I've already shaded and try to work out some of the details and build up more value in those places where it's needed. One of the most useful tools when doing that is, of course, using a combination of a tapered stroke and cross hatching. But sometimes if you also choose to play around with that stroke, sometimes you go back and forth, shuffle the pencil, that can also work. Although a more gradual, more controlled way of doing things is one directional tapered stroke. So I shaded the neck area a little bit more rapidly. And it looks a little bit ugly now, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of refining to it, smoothing it out, both by making some changes to the shading approach and also by using the blending tools. I'm going to do a little bit of work here at the top now, to the right, on the right side of the parting on the hair. And the thing is that in my reference I can't really see the top of the head because it's been cropped. I'm going to have to improvise there a little bit. And I'm just going to skip from one part of the drawing to another, trying to refine some details and some values where needed. And of course here on the neck area, and as well as some other areas, there can be a little bit of rough texture. Maybe I shaded some areas a little bit more rapidly. So in those areas I will need to blend a little bit more thoroughly. If I just want to take away a bit of value here and there without messing things up too much, I can use a kneaded eraser. Now for more precision and for some larger, broader strokes, I can use a pencil eraser, something like a Kohinoor pencil eraser or this Tombow 100 eraser. That works really well when you need something that erases but can be held like a pencil. So it's very convenient, though it's not necessarily superior to the kneaded eraser, because the kneaded eraser has some advantages of its own. And this lower part of the hair is going to appear a little bit darker because it's further away from the light source, plus it's casting a little bit of shadow onto the body under it. I'm doing the straps of a dress or a top, whatever it is, and I'm just going to do a little bit more work on the hair, adding some more of these lines to refine the appearance of the hair. Also adding some details on the mouth. Now, in order to make the hair look more three-dimensional, I just need to have a greater range of value. So here and there I need to go back in and go in between those segments of hair, those wavy curls, whatever they are, waves of hair, and just add a little bit more value in between them, a little bit more shadow between them using a darker pencil, because I don't want the hair to look too flat and too simple. It doesn't look simple or flat when you look at it from up close, but the thing is that when you take a few steps back and you look at it at the distance, it's a little bit more difficult to see those more subtle differences in value. So sometimes you need some slightly bolder, stronger, darker values in order to achieve a more three-dimensional effect. I'm drawing this necklace now. There's going to be a lot of contrast on it because some parts of it are really bright because they're reflecting a little bit of light. And I'm going to need to shade the skin, the body around it, the neck and the chest area. so that the necklace stands out because it's lighter, it's reflective. So the rest of the body around it is going to have to appear darker. The skin around it is going to have to appear just a little bit darker, even though she's very light-skinned. For that, I'm just going to do some blending with a Q-tip again. Work carefully around the necklace area and try to build up the value just by using the blending process without having to do much shading, much additional shading. So I'm going to have to do a little bit more work on the hair now on the right side and at the top. This top area is especially dark. It's like I said, the hair around the parting is a little bit darker, but there's also more shadow there. And just like I did with the hair on the left side here, I'll also try to break the hair up into smaller segments. So from the appearance of the hair, you can tell that it's kind of like a scrunchy hair appearance with some light waves. It's a nice looking hairstyle that suits her face pretty well. But it's not that easy to draw as it looks, because defining the individual shapes, the individual segments of the hair can be a little bit tricky and honestly a little bit tedious. I'm doing more background here on the right and trying to finish it completely. First by laying down some darker values and then by blending with a Q-tip and a brush again. I'm going to have to use a brush a little bit because it makes things smoother. And I'm just doing some more work on the hair. Now let me just say a few more words about how I approached drawing background. So, because I want to minimize the amount of smudging, and graphite pencils do smudge at least a little bit. It's a good idea to work from left to right if you're right-handed like me, which is what I normally do. I work from left to right and from top to bottom, and that's sort of the order in which I did most of the background. Now here on this right side of the hair, because my hair no longer has to rest on the part of the drawing on the paper, I can just finish that after I've done the right side of the background. So once again I lay down the texture of the hair using those slightly curved, longer tapered strokes, and try to divide the hair into segments so that it looks wavy, so that it looks as natural as possible. And then I did some blending with a brush, and that really sort of distributes the graphite a little more evenly, softens the whole thing a little bit, softens those marks so that the hair looks more natural. And then once I have that in place, I can just go back in and add some deeper values in those deeper shadow areas. And of course, as a final touch, I will be using an eraser once more. But first I'm just trying to shade the hair properly so that I have enough value to work with, to begin with. And once that is done, I can just pick up my Tombow Mono Zero eraser again, and you can see how easy it is for me to make these curved strokes, because it just feels natural to work this way when you can hold the eraser just like you would a pencil. I can draw some flyaway hairs here and there to make the edge or the outline of the hair a little bit more natural, but I can also use it to make some parts of the hair, some of these segments a little bit lighter, because obviously some of them will be bulging out or sticking out a little bit more and therefore catching more light from the light source, and whenever something is closer to the light source it's going to appear lighter, and when it's further away from the light source or tucked in some kind of a shadow area, it's going to appear darker. I'm just going to finish the shading of the body here on the right by shading the shoulder area here. I have a small patch of darker value around the armpit area, but the rest of it is mostly going to be lighter. I'm just softening that with a brush. I don't really need to spend too much time working on this part of the body. mostly going to focus on the face because the face needs a little bit more refining. I wasn't entirely happy with the portrait, so I kept fidgeting with some of the facial features like the shape of the nose, the eyes, the mouth, and just adding a little bit of value here and there, then taking away a little bit, and then once I didn't like the modifications I made, I just went back to the previous version by working over it, and eventually I was sort of happy with the way it was turning out, and I decided to wrap it up. So here I'm just putting down some finishing touches, just to add in a little bit more shadow under the nose, and I signed the drawing in the lower right corner. So there it is, the finished drawing. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other videos, and for more content check out my Patreon. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.